Hey everybody, how's it going? In this video, we are going to create a program in Java that can take a pool of letters like this and print out all the possible English words that can be made out of those letters. So this can be used to solve like Scrabble games, Words with Friends, any of those sorts of word scramble games. We're going to start from scratch, program the whole thing beginning to end right here in this video. So you'll see exactly how it's done. If this is your first time on the channel, my name is John and I make a Java tutorial video like this one every single week. So be sure to hit the subscribe button so you don't miss one. And before we get started, the full source code for this whole program is available in the link down in the description, so go and get it. Okay, so in this program, we are going to have to, of course, take in a bunch of letters from the user via the keyboard, and we're going to see what English words we can make out of those letters. So of course, in order to do that, we're going to need like a dictionary file, a list of a bunch of valid English words. So I found one that I really liked, and it's available in a link down in the description as well, so go grab that. But any dictionary file that you find will work great. You can use any one that you find if you like better separately. Just make sure it has like one word per line. It's like a .txt file, a text file, just to make your life easier. So go ahead and download that file and put it in a location where you know where it is on your computer. Now the first thing we're going to do is make sure we can read in that dictionary file. And we're going to use the buffered reader class in Java to do that. And so we'll call it reader, buffered reader equals new buffered reader. And that buffered reader constructor takes a parameter, and we need to tell that what we want it to read. And for our purposes, we're going to have it read a file. So we actually have to pass in a new file reader. And to create a file reader, it takes the location of our text file. So just go ahead and paste in the exact location on your computer of that text file, but just pass in wherever you happen to put it on your computer. So I know you guys are smart. I know you know how to do that. And we're working with Eclipse, so I can hit Control-Shift-O to automatically organize my imports. And you can see we have an import of java.io.bufferedReader and java.io.fileReader. So if you're working with some other kind of tool that doesn't automatically do the imports for you, that's what they are. And we can also see that Eclipse is complaining here that we have an unhandled type file not found exception. And we probably won't do any fancy handling of that here. If we can't read the file, our program can't work. So we're just going ahead and say add a throws declaration here. Just add a throw file not found exception here. And now let's make sure we can go through and actually use this reader to read all the lines of our file. And we'll just print them out for now to prove that we can read the file properly. So to do that, to go through every line of a file using a buffered reader like this, you use a special kind of for loop. So we'll say for, and the object we'll create in our for loop is a string. We're going to take the word that's on every line. And so we'll have a string, let's just call it a current word, that's going to represent the current line that we're on. And we'll set it equal to reader.readLine. And you can see that the Java docs of this method here says reads a line of text. And so what that's going to do is read the very first line of code and put it in this current word variable. And so next we need the condition for staying in the loop. Like we're going to stay in the loop while there's still more lines to be read. And we'll know there's another line to be read if the current word that we've gotten isn't null. So we can just say current word not equals null. So if it ever reads a line into this current word variable and it turns out to be null, that means there wasn't a line anymore to read, so we've reached the end of the file. And then we need our iterator. So in the normal for loop, it'd be like I++, but we're working with a file reader here, not like a normal sort of array. So what we want to do to increment here is we need to get the next line of the file. So all we have to do is say current word equals reader.readLine. So that's kind of a long for loop declaration. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see the whole thing. For string current word equals reader.readLine. So to start, we're going to read the first line of the file and put it in this variable. We're going to keep going while the current word is not equal to null. And to get the next line to iterate each time through the loop, we'll do another current word equals reader.readLine. And you can see that Eclipse is complaining here about an unhandled IO exception. So we'll just do the same thing we did before and just go ahead and add that throws declaration. And a little tip there, the file not found exception that we had before was actually a subtype of IO exception. So if we just say throws IO exception, it covers them both. And you can get rid of this file not found exception import because we don't need it anymore. So now I'm going to zoom back in so you guys can see a little bit more easily. For every iteration in this loop, this current word variable should hold the current line that we're on, the current word that we're iterating over. Let's just go ahead and print that out to the console and see if we can print out our whole dictionary file. So system.out.println current word. Okay, let's run this and see what happens. Woo! Ooh, sweet. Looking great. We go all the way to ZZZ, which is somehow a valid Scrabble word, but hey, good to know. All right, so our file input is working splendidly. So the next thing we're going to do here is the keyboard input part where the user can type in the pool of letters that they're working with. So if they're playing Scrabble or Words with Friends or something, it's the 6 or whatever letters that they have in their hand. But our program will be able to take any number of letters. You can type in 1 letter, you can type in 1,000 letters, and it's still going to work. And we're going to want to do this kind of at the top of our program. Before we start looping through all the possible words, we're going to want to get that input from the user. So to do that, we're going to use the scanner class, as we always do. Scanner equals new scanner, and pass in system.in for keyboard input from the user. Add the import java.util scanner to get that to work. We're going to print something out to the user just to prompt them to enter their pool of letters. Sys out, please enter the pool of letters. And then we're going to take that input as a string. So string, we'll just call it letters, equals scanner.next line. That will get the next line of input that the user puts into the console, hits enter, it'll get all those letters, and put them in that string. All right, so you might be wondering, and it's a very good question, how are we actually going to do this? How are we going to take this scrambled list of letters and see which of all these dictionary words can be made out of that pool of letters? How are we going to do that? And that's a really good question. So here's how I think we can do it. So what if we go through the pool of letters that we have and just count up how many of each letter that we have available. So let's say, we go through this whole string of letters and say, okay, there were 2 A's, there were no B's, there was 1 C. And so when we're done looping through the pool of letters, we know how many of each letter are available. And then we can loop through each word in our word list and make sure that we can make the current word with the pool of letters that we have available. So as a quick example, let's say that our pool of letters was this, AABRT. That's the pool of letters we have to make words from. What we're going to do is look at this string and say, how many of each letter do we have here? Okay, we have, for A's, we have 2 of those. For B's, we have 1 of those. For R's, we also have 1. And for T's, we also have 1. And for anything that isn't in this map here, any letter that doesn't exist, we know that we have 0 of those to work with. And then we're going to go through each and every word in our dictionary list and make sure that we have all the letters available in our word list to make the current word we're looking at. So let's just say our first word in the dictionary was aardvark. Well, our program will say, well, for A's, we're going to need 3 of them. We're going to need 2 R's, etc. down the line, and make that full map for this word also, and then go through and make sure we have all the letters we need. So the program will say, okay, I need 3 A's. Do I have 3 A's? And it'll say, nope, you don't. You only have 2. And then it'll quit looking at that word and try the next one. And then say maybe later on it encounters the word bar on our word list. And then it says, okay, for A's, I'm going to need 1 of those. For B's, I'm going to need 1 of those, and for R's, I'll need 1 of those as well. And it'll loop through each of these letters and say, okay, do I have 1 A available? Yes, I've got 2. So that's great. Do I have 1 B available? Yes, I do. Do I have 1 R available? Yes, I do. And once it gets through all those letters and confirms it has enough to make this word, we will print this word out to the console as a valid word that can be made from our list of letters. So I hope that makes sense. If not, just ruminate on it for a bit until it kind of sinks in, because it's going to be important to how our program works. So let's actually go ahead and just comment this out so we kind of have it available for a mental model as we work through this code. Now what we want to actually do next is create this mapping in our code. And to create a mapping like this, it's of course of a character to a number. So we can have, say we have 2 A's, we have 1 B. Well, we're actually going to use a map, and it's going to look kind of exactly like that. And we'll say it's a map of character to integer. And we'll call that letters count map, because it's going to be basically a map of the count of all the letters that we have in our letter string. We'll say equals new hash map. That's a perfectly good kind of map to use here. Okay, Control-Shift-O again to organize imports. But if you, again, are not using an IDE, we need java-util map and java.util.hashmap. So now comes the tricky part where we have to loop through the string of letters that the user has passed in and count up how many of each letter that we have available. That'll be kind of a classic kind of for loop. We'll just say for int I equals 0. You've probably done this before. I less than. We're going to go to the length of the letters input that we're getting. So we'll just do letters dot length. and then I++ to iterate. And then for each iteration through the loop, we want to grab the current character we're looking at. So we can just say char current char equals letters dot char at the current index of I. So what this is going to do, so let's say this was our pool of letters, A, B, R, T. The first time through this loop, this current char is going to get the character at the 0th position in our string, which is going to be A. So what we want to do here is set the right count for the current letter that we're looking at. But it isn't necessarily the first time we're encountering this letter as we go through this for loop. Maybe we've got a huge list of characters and this is like the 5th A that we're seeing already. We don't know. So what we want to do is get the current count for that letter off of our map. And we can do that by saying int count equals. So what we want to do here, because we don't know at what iteration in the loop we're working with, we want to say if we already have a count for this letter on our map, get it. Otherwise, it'll be 0 because we don't have that letter yet. So here's what that looks like. We're going to see if our letters count map contains the key of the current char. So this is just a true or false value. Hey, do I have this value on my map already? Do I already have an account for A, for example, on my map? So we can say if we find that we have a current count for that letter, we are going to get that current count. So we'll just say letters count map dot get the current char. So this will get us the count of that current character. And otherwise, if it didn't contain that key already, we know that our count is 0. So a quick note here, this is using what's called a ternary operator. And if you haven't seen it before, it might look kind of scary, but it's really not terribly complex. So this piece of code is saying, if I already have a count for the current character I'm looking at, let's say I want to know, hey, I need to add an A. Did we already add any A's before? So if we already have a count for that letter, then I want to get it from our map. Otherwise, if we don't have a count, then we know that it's 0. And then right after that, we want to set our current count to be 1 more than whatever the count was before. And then after that, we just need to add 1 to that character's count on the map. So all that looks like is letters count map dot put. So we're telling Java, hey, put on my map that for this current character I'm looking at, current char, that I have 1 more than I did a second ago. So let's walk through again exactly what this code is doing, because this is the central part of this program. Let's say that again, this is our pool of letters that we're looking through, A, B, R, T. We're going to loop through each character in this string. First character is A, and for the first time through the loop, our map is empty. We haven't added any letters to it yet. So it's going to try to get a count. It says, hey, does my map contain this key yet for the letter A? No, it doesn't. So it's not going to do this. It's going to instead get 0 because this is the first time we are encountering the letter A in our string of letters. So now we know that our current count is 0, but we want to record what our new count is now that we have encountered 1 letter A. So we're putting 1 new entry on our map here where our current character is the letter A, and we're telling Java we now have 1 A. And now the second time through this loop, it's picking up the second character in this string, the second letter A. That goes into this current char here. And again, we're asking Java, hey, do we have this key in our map anywhere for this letter A? And Java says, well, yes, we do. We have 1 for the letter A. We have already encountered 1 letter A. And so we say, great, get that current count. And so the number 1 gets filled into this count variable. And now we put a new value for the letter A on the map by adding 1 to that count. And so it will put in that same spot A, the value 2. Does that kind of make sense? So it'll loop through again and then encounter the value B, and it's for the first time. So it'll say, okay, now we've got 1B. And then on down the line, it'll say we have 1R and 1T. So at the end of looping through all of this pool of letters, we're going to have a letters count map that looks like this. All right, so that's a complex part of our program, but we're going to need to use this piece of code later when we want to get all the letter counts for all of our words in our dictionary. So because we don't want to have to rewrite this, because we're going to have to reuse this piece of code, let's go ahead and put it in its own method so we can call it whenever we need it. So to do that pretty easily in Eclipse, you can highlight all the code that you want to go into the method and hit Alt-Shift-M, and it'll bring up this little extract method dialog for you. And you just name the method whatever you want. So let's just call it get character count map. So we hit enter there. So now it's created our method for us. get character count map, and it's going to take in a string of letters, and we actually want it to return this letters count map, which it's not doing right now. It just made it a void for some reason. So we instead want it to return this value, a map of character to integer. So let's change our return type to that. And then at the end of our for loop, all we have to do is actually return our letters count map. Okay. All right, so let's scroll back up here and notice we're just calling this method here, and we're not actually storing the map anywhere. So let's go ahead and still just grab this declaration so that we can set the result of this mapping to a variable that we can use. So now, after we call that fancy method that we just made, our letters count map will have a mapping of every character that we had in that string and the number of times we had each of those characters. And actually, before I forget, the more eagle-eyed of you may have noticed that in my dictionary file here, all of my words are in uppercase, but perhaps our user types something in lowercase. Well, we don't want it to just break. We want it to act correctly when that happens. So what we can do is just take what they type in the scanner input and just call to uppercase on it, and then that'll make everything they type in all caps no matter what they type in. So it'll match our words easily later on. Okay, so let's move our little map comment example down here to where we're going to have to write some more code, just so we can see it kind of for reference, for a mental reference. All right, now remember what we were doing. We gathered the input from the user to get the pool of letters that we want to descramble and find all the words from. And we grabbed our dictionary file, and we've got code that currently loops through all of the words in that file. So now, instead of just printing out this current word, we now need to have logic to see if the current word we're looking at can be made from the letters that we've got. So the first thing we want to do is get the character count map, just like we did for our pool of letters. We want to get it for the current word that we're looking at in our dictionary file as we're looping through it. And now that we've made it a standalone method, it's very easy for us to do. We don't have to write that complicated logic again. We can just call it. So we again need to make a map of character to integer, call it current word map, and set it equal to get the current character count map of our current word. And it's just that easy. Now we have that same complicated character count map on the current word we're looking at in the dictionary. Now what that has given us, remember we are looping through every word in our dictionary file here. Let's say we were looping over the word bar at the current moment. What this is going to give us, this current word map will have a map that looks like this for the current word. We have one A, one B, and one R. Now what we want to do is loop through all of the letters that we have in our map and make sure that our pool of letters has at least that many available for us to make this word. Okay, so now let's write the loop that's going to loop through our current word map, one that looks like this, and do that comparison to make sure we have all the letters that we need. So to do that, we can just say for character in current word map dot key set. So what does that mean? The key set is the set of keys in a map. So a map has a bunch of key value pairs. So for this map here, like the keys are all these characters, and the value is all of the counts of those characters. So this loop is going to loop through the key set, which is the set of characters here. In this case, ABR for the word bar. What we want to do is get the count for each character we run into and see if we have at least that many in our pool of letters count. So we can say int a current word char count equals current word map dot get character. So for example here, the first time through this loop, we'll encounter the letter A, and we're just saying, hey Java, get me the count that relates to that letter A, and so it's just going to get the number 1. So now we want to get the number of that character that is available in our pool of characters. So similarly, we'll say int letters char count equals, we're going to use our letters count map from our pool of letters, and we'll say if that contains the key of the current character, then we want to get its current value. So we'll just use another ternary operator here. So if we have that character in the map, then we'll just get that value, letters count map dot get character. So that's going to get how many of that character we have available in our pool of letters. Otherwise, if it doesn't contain this key, then we know that we have 0 of that letter available. After that, all we really have to do is compare these two ints. So we can say that if our current word char count is greater than our letters char count, so what this is saying is that if our current word needs more of this letter than we have available in our pool, then we have to break out of our loop. Sorry, we can't make this word with this pool of letters. And on that note, actually, we're going to need another Boolean variable created here so that we can know when we come out of this loop whether it had this problem or not. So we can just call it Boolean can make current word, and we're going to start it out, initialize it to true, but then if we run into a situation where we require more of a certain letter than we have in our pool of available letters, then we will set that to false. So in this situation, can make current word equals false. So then now, right after this for loop, we can just look at the value of this variable. If it's still true at the end of that for loop, then we know we're good to go. We can make this word. So it's just a simple if statement. If you can make the current word, then let's print it out to the console. System.out.println current word. Okay, now I think that should work. Let's cross our fingers and run it. Okay, so please enter the pool of letters. Good random pool of letters. Looks great. Let's see. Awesome, I think that worked. So we have SAFOIJ, and this is totally valid. We can make sofa, we can make soja, whatever the heck word that is. Ah, that is so cool. All right, let's give it a tougher challenge. Let's enter in like a whole bunch of letters. Whole lot of letters. So what can you make out of that? Wow. Wow, there are a ton of words. All right, sweet. The main part of our program is working. It's successfully spitting out all the possible English words we can make from the pool of letters that we enter in. Sweet. But we're not done quite yet. We have some code cleanup we have to do if we're going to be decent programmers. Now, first of all, I noticed that if we type in like a pool of letters, it spits out a good list, but it doesn't say that that's what it's doing. We might want to just add a quick statement that says, here's the possible words that you can make from those letters. But we can just do that right before our big for loop here. So just with a simple sysout statement, all possible words you can make with those letters. Now, another thing, if you've watched any of my videos before, you know that we still have a problem here with our scanner. We are not closing it like the good Boy Scouts we are. So let's go down to the bottom of our main method and just remember to close your scanner, or you will have a resource leak and it is just embarrassing. So now you can feel good about yourself. Except also, we have the same thing with our reader object here. We also need to close our readers. All right, so let's go ahead and zoom out and just take a look at our fine work. We can get rid of these comments now that we used as kind of a mental image as we coded that we don't really need anymore. So look, that's a pretty small little program, maybe, what is that, 60 lines, less than that. That does a pretty cool thing, right? You can enter like a pool of any letters you want, and it's going to find you all the English words you can make out of those letters. That's pretty awesome. Now you can use your powers for good, or you can use your powers for evil, like cheating against your mom at Words with Friends. But don't do that. Don't be a terrible person. Babe, I'm not going to tell you how to live your life. Grab the program and do with it what you will. Now, if you enjoyed this, learned something, got some value out of it, please let me know by liking the video. And if you'd like to see more Java tutorial videos like this every single week, be sure to hit that subscribe button. I'm getting these tutorials out to more people. Totally depends on you liking, subscribing, and sharing. So I want to sincerely thank you if you take the time to do that. And if you do, I will see you back here next week for another Java tutorial.